What if I told you that beneath the lavish Hollywood hills, under a mansion owned by one of America's most beloved directors, there lies a tunnel so disturbing, so horrifying, that it made hardened FBI agents recoil in disbelief? Because that's exactly what happened. And the man at the center of it all? Rob Reiner. The same Rob Reiner who gave us Stand By Me, A Few Good Men, and When Harry Met Sally. A man celebrated not just for his storytelling, but for his activism, his progressive values, his public persona as the lovable liberal titan of Tinseltown. But behind the velvet curtains and glossy magazine covers, there was something else. Something buried. Literally. This isn't just another tabloid rumor. It's not internet gossip. This is about what happens when the masks fall off and the truth claws its way to the surface, when the walls of fame can no longer hold back the screams echoing from beneath the floorboards. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And if you're thinking this is just a celebrity scandal, think again. What the FBI found in the hidden passageways under Reiner's estate wasn't just shocking, it was stomach-turning. There were bodies. Not one, not two, but three. Lifeless, forgotten, preserved, as if they were waiting to be found. But here's the most chilling part. They weren't buried. They weren't hidden in some shallow grave. They were posed, intentionally, as if part of something much, much darker. Still think this is just another Hollywood headline? Let's go back. Back before the agents kicked in the door. Before the team showed up with ground-penetrating radar. Before the tip, the anonymous message that warned of a hidden chamber of horrors beneath the mansion of a man who pretends to save the world. Because everything, changed the night that call came in. It was just past 1:20 a.m. when the message first hit the FBI's tip line. Typed. No voice. No traceable number. But it read like something out of a psychological thriller. You want the truth? Check Reiner's cellar. There's a door behind the wine wall. Don't open it unless you're ready to see what monsters look like when they take off the makeup. At first, they thought it was a hoax. A prank. Maybe some deranged fan or conspiracy nut with a grudge. But then came the coordinates. Exact GPS. And attached? A photograph. Dark. Blurry. But visible. A dirt corridor. Wood-paneled. And something lying at the end of it. Something that looked human. Within hours, the house was surrounded. Black SUVs. Tactical gear. No sirens. No lights. Just quiet coordination. Rob Reiner wasn't home. He was at a charity gala in Palm Springs, smiling for the cameras. Inside his $14 million Los Angeles mansion, the agents moved with surgical precision. They found the wine cellar quickly. And behind it, just as the tipster said, a false panel. A click. A hiss. And then, the darkness. That's when the air changed. You ever been underground in a place that wasn't meant to be discovered? The oxygen tastes different. Thicker. Like it's hiding something. The agents descended. Slowly. Flashlights flickering on damp stone walls. The tunnel stretched far, farther than expected. Curving beneath the house like a serpent coiled in secrecy. That's when one agent gagged. And another whispered, "We need a forensic team, now." But before we go deeper, before we reveal what was actually in that chamber, you need to understand why this story matters now. For decades, Hollywood has shielded its own. We've all heard the whispers, the odd disappearances, the former child actors who vanished from the spotlight without explanation, the producers who retired early after anonymous allegations, the NDAs, the private settlements, the quiet resignations. We laughed it off. We called it rumor, conspiracy, just another QAnon rabbit hole, some said. But this time, there were bodies. And the man whose property held them? He wasn't some fringe figure. He wasn't a nobody. He was Rob Reiner, a man who built a career on emotion, on heart, on stories about doing the right thing. But if this was all a misunderstanding, a setup, or even a sick joke, why was the mansion immediately sealed off under federal investigation? Why were 3 cadavers found under his home? And why did no mainstream outlet dare cover it until pieces leaked out online? What were they protecting? And more importantly, who? Let's rewind even further. Rob Reiner bought the home in 1994, a sprawling Spanish-style estate nestled on a hill overlooking the city. But the home itself was much older, built in 1926 by a silent film magnate with a reputation for parties that went on for days, and guests who sometimes didn't leave. there were always stories. Whispers. One real estate agent even admitted to advising clients not to buy that particular property due to bad energy and creepy underground drafts. But Rob? He loved it, called it his sanctuary, said it helped him write. He reportedly installed a private meditation room, a soundproof studio, and, according to his own interviews, a personal archive of every film script he ever loved, kept below deck. But no one, not even his closest friends, had ever seen what was really beneath that house. Until now. Here's the part no one talks about. This wasn't just a hidden room. It wasn't a doomsday shelter or some dusty old wine vault. It was a tunnel, a constructed tunnel, reinforced, purposeful, dug with care, lined with lights, air circulation. It wasn't meant for storage. It was meant for something else. And when the agents reached the end of it, they found more than they bargained for. You know that moment in horror films where everything slows down? The music fades, and you know something is coming, but you can't stop it? That's what happened next. Three forms. Still, wrapped in aged sheets. Arranged in a way that suggested they weren't simply dumped. Two female, one male, all estimated to have been dead for more than a decade. Possibly longer. No signs of decay, at least not externally. Preserved. Somehow. But it wasn't just the bodies that chilled them. It was what surrounded them. A series of paintings, symbols, candles, long burnt out. And in the corner, an old camcorder covered in dust. But wait, there's more. One of the agents, trying not to vomit, noticed scratch marks. On the wall. Faint. Faded. Like someone had tried to claw their way out. Who were these people? Why were they there? And how had no one noticed? That's when one agent, shaken, made a quiet call to his superior. We've got something big here, and we're going to need more than just gloves and bags. They sealed the tunnel within the hour. The media? Silent. Rob Reiner? Silent. And for days, the FBI refused to comment. But the story leaked anyway. This isn't the first time secrets have slithered out from under the red carpet. From Jeffrey Epstein's private island to the mysterious Club 33 in Disneyland, we've all learned one thing. When powerful people build things underground, it's not usually for storage. So what was Rob Reiner storing? And why were the walls of his tunnel filled with photographs of young actors from the 1980s and 90s? Some of whom were never seen again. Yes, you read that right. Framed photos, dates, scribbled notes, all lining the hallway like a twisted gallery. Some of the faces you'd recognize. Others, you'd have to look up old missing persons reports. But one thing was clear. This was curated. It was intentional. So now, I ask you, what if your favorite movies were made by someone hiding a secret so grotesque, it would make you question every scene, every line, every moment that once made you cry? What if the Hollywood elite, those who demand your loyalty, your admiration, your applause, were using that spotlight to blind you from what's happening in the shadows? It's a question that's haunted insiders for decades. But now, it's no longer a question. It's a crime scene. And the real horror? We've only scratched the surface. Because what came next, the tapes, the ledger, the names, would blow the lid off everything. And no one, not even the FBI, was ready for it. What does it take for a team of seasoned federal agents to freeze in place? Not flinch, not duck for cover, but stop, mid-step, mid-breath, and stare into the darkness like they've just seen something that doesn't belong in this world? Because that's exactly what happened inside Rob Reiner's mansion. The air was cold, not naturally cold, but unnatural, like someone had left a freezer door open to hell. A kind of chill that settled not just in the bones, but somewhere deeper. The kind that whispers, "You shouldn't be here." And the further they went, the clearer it became. This wasn't a panic room. This wasn't some collector's secret vault. This was a chamber of secrets. And secrets, as we're about to learn, don't stay buried forever. But let's rewind the tape, just a little. The moment that anonymous tip came in, something strange happened. The system flagged it twice. Once for the word cadaver, and once for underground. A double keyword hit that triggered an automatic escalation. Usually, the FBI doesn't act on anonymous tips unless they can be verified through a second source. But something about this one stuck. Maybe it was the specificity. Maybe it was the GPS coordinates attached, accurate down to the 10th decimal point. Or maybe, just maybe, someone on the inside already knew something, but didn't dare say it out loud. So, By 3:12 a.m., a team was mobilized. Not your average SWAT team. This one came with forensic specialists, crime scene analysts, and one cryptic attachment. A profiler from Quantico known for identifying ritualistic behavioral signatures. Let that sink in. Before the team even reached Reiner's estate, someone at the Bureau had flagged this as potentially ceremonial. Why? What did they know? The approach was silent. The mansion was in Beverly Hills, wrapped in hedges and perched on a bluff like a king surveying his kingdom. The place screamed opulence. Arched doorways, imported Italian marble, windows taller than most people's homes. But none of that mattered now, because behind the designer gates and the filtered koi ponds, there was a secret that had finally clawed its way to the surface. The team breached the property using a silent warrant, one reserved for situations where tipping off the target could result in evidence being destroyed. Rob Reiner, fortunately, was still at his gala, surrounded by flashing bulbs and staged laughter. He had no idea. Inside, agents moved quickly, room by room, floor by floor, until they reached the basement. That's where everything changed. The wine cellar was pristine. Mahogany shelves, rows of vintage reds and whites, each bottle cradled like treasure. Reiner was known to brag about it. One of the best private collections in the city, he once told Vanity Fair. But there was something odd. A seam in the wall. A panel that didn't quite match the grain of the wood around it. You had to look close. Very close. An agent brushed her glove over it and paused. There. The faintest breeze. Behind solid stone. She pulled gently, and the panel clicked, revealing a staircase descending into pitch black. Let me ask you something. If you were in that situation, faced with a hidden staircase in a house owned by a man with decades of influence, would you go down? Would you want to know? Or would you walk away, telling yourself, it's not my job to uncover monsters? Because what the agents found down there would haunt them for the rest of their careers. The tunnel was tight, uncomfortably so. Low ceilings, claustrophobic, as if whoever designed it wanted it to be unnerving. Lights flickered along the ceiling, bare bulbs with dust so thick they glowed like dying stars. The walls were raw concrete. The floor? Dirt. Not polished. Not finished. Intentional. They walked in silence. Then the smell hit. First faint, like mold. Then sharper. Chemical. Then unmistakable. Decay. One agent gagged. Another swore under her breath. But they kept going. And then the tunnel opened. A chamber. Square. 15 by 15 feet. Ventilated, somehow. An old fan in the corner hummed just loud enough to mask the sound of your heartbeat. And in the center, on a platform built from stone and rusted steel, were the bodies. 3 of them. Wrapped. Arranged. One lying flat. One kneeling. And the third? Slumped against the far wall. Face exposed. She was young. Maybe early 20s. Blonde. Eyes open. As if frozen in a moment of panic that never ended. Her skin looked preserved. Not mummified. Not decomposed. Preserved. The agents stood still for several seconds. No one moved. Then one whispered, This isn't just homicide. This is something else. They called it in. Immediately. Code black. We need full forensics. Immediate lockdown. And from that moment, the mansion was no longer a home. It was a crime scene. But here's the part no one tells you. What spooked the agents the most wasn't the bodies. It was the surroundings. The walls of the chamber were covered in drawings. Hand-drawn symbols. Circles. Shapes resembling runes or glyphs. Some had words scrawled beneath them. Latin. Maybe Greek. One phrase was repeated 6 times. Lusum me tenebris. The light holds me in darkness. Creepy? Sure. But it gets worse. Because next to the symbols were photographs. Framed. Clean. Dust-free. Headshots. Publicity stills. Mostly young actors, many from the 80s and 90s. Some were instantly recognizable. Others, you'd have to squint. And beside each one, a number. Not a name. What did they represent? Order of appearance? Something darker? No one knew. But the implication was clear. This wasn't random. Someone had planned this room, cared for it, curated it. And that someone lived above. They pulled the tapes next. 6 VHS cassettes in a drawer beneath the stone platform. Each one labeled only with a date. All from different years. The most recent? 2007. One agent began crying quietly. The profiler, silent until now, finally spoke. This isn't storage. This isn't a kill room. This is ritual, another agent added. And it didn't stop with Reiner. Because in the far corner of the chamber, barely visible in the dim light, was a secondary tunnel. Smaller, narrower, unfinished, still being dug, as if the builder hadn't planned on stopping. As if this was just the beginning. So what happened next? Within hours, a perimeter was established. Every room searched. Every device confiscated. Staff were questioned. Surveillance footage pulled. But here's where things get strange. Nothing showed the tunnel entrance. Despite having a dozen security cameras throughout the house, not a single feed captured the wine cellar's hidden panel. How is that possible? Reiner himself had told Architectural Digest in 2005 that he oversaw the installation of a full surveillance suite to protect the estate. So either the footage was wiped, the camera was fake, or someone inside was covering it up. And here's the kicker. When agents tried to pull external backups from the cloud, they were gone, purged, encrypted, like someone knew this day was coming. The raid itself was never announced publicly. No press conference, no news bulletin. Only later did whispers begin to leak online. A neighbor posted a blurry photo of black SUVs. Another claimed to hear screaming from beneath the house. But the mainstream media? Silent, as if told not to touch the story. Or worse, paid not to. And yet, questions spread. Why was Reiner's estate cordoned off? Why had he suddenly canceled 3 appearances? And why, when finally reached by a reporter, did he only say, "My attorneys will handle this"? No further comment. That's not a denial. That's a firewall. And every day since the raid, more pieces have begun to fall into place. Financial records, missing person links, connections to others in the industry. Because what the FBI found in that chamber wasn't just evidence. It was a portal into something far bigger and far darker. But the most chilling moment came 2 hours into the raid, when one of the agents discovered a journal tucked behind a false wall. It was leather-bound, torn, pages ripped out. But what remained were horrifying. Entries, dated, written in a woman's hand. Scattered thoughts, descriptions of the tunnel, of being watched, of knowing too much. And one line, scrawled in all caps, burned itself into every agent's memory. They only bring you down there if you scream too loud. Who wrote it? One of the bodies? A victim we haven't found yet? Or someone still alive? No one knows. Not yet. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Have you ever looked at something so meticulously hidden, so expertly disguised, that the very fact you found it makes you question what else you've missed? That's the feeling that crept up the spine of every FBI agent inside Rob Reiner's estate. Because this tunnel, it wasn't just an accidental crawl space. It wasn't a leftover from construction. It wasn't even designed like a typical basement addition. This was engineered, measured, planned, concealed with the kind of precision that doesn't come from curiosity or survival prep. No, this tunnel wasn't built for safety. It was built for secrecy. But the most terrifying question isn't what it was used for. It's how long it had been there, and how many people had walked above it, completely unaware of what lurked just beneath their feet. It started with a wall, a clean, cold panel of mahogany in the wine cellar, flush against the rest of the shelving. At first glance, you wouldn't notice a thing. No hinges, no seams, no smudges. But one agent, trained in architectural subversion, caught it. He noticed the panel was slightly warmer to the touch than the surrounding wall. A sign of airflow, something behind it. With a gentle push, it opened. And what greeted them wasn't a dusty crawl space or a forgotten root cellar. It was a staircase, spiral, narrow, made of wrought iron that moaned with every step, as if it didn't want to be used. And at the bottom, a corridor, dark, low-ceilinged, bare bulb lights hanging from wires that looked older than some of the agents' careers. That first glimpse into the unknown, into that suffocating corridor, was enough to make a seasoned tactical team hesitate. Because the very existence of the tunnel violated every instinct they had about suburban luxury homes. This wasn't a man cave. It was a cave. Let's break this down for a second. Rob Reiner's mansion, as documented in public real estate records, was built in 1926. It had undergone multiple renovations, major ones in the mid-90s and again around 2007. Those updates included new security systems, landscaping, and custom interiors. But nowhere was there a permit for subterranean construction. Let me repeat that. There was no legal record of any tunnel being added to that property. No blueprints. No utility clearance. No inspections. Someone went to great lengths to ensure this tunnel did not exist on paper. So ask yourself, why would anyone, especially a multi-millionaire celebrity, risk building an unregistered underground passage in one of the most heavily scrutinized neighborhoods in Los Angeles? What was worth that risk? And more importantly, what needed to be hidden? As the agents descended deeper, the walls began to change. From smooth plaster to rough stone. From neat finishes to uneven concrete and exposed rebar. It was as if the tunnel had been dug in stages. The first section was almost elegant, symmetrical walls, electric lighting, even ventilation ducts. But after the midpoint, it turned primitive, narrower, darker. The air was thick and humid, with a metallic tang that clung to the back of your throat. One agent described it as walking into a memory that wasn't yours, but wanted to be remembered. And then, the tunnel split. Two paths, one leading left, with newer support beams. The other leading right, unfinished. Dirt walls, wooden bracing, a shovel still leaning against the side like someone had just been digging minutes earlier. Let that image settle for a moment. Because someone was still working down there. They took the left path first. It led to the room, the chamber with the bodies. But that wasn't the only stop. Along the corridor were small inlets. Carved-out cubbies, each filled with something different. A broken lamp, a child's shoe, a stack of old Polaroids, bound with a rubber band. None of it made sense on its own. But together, it looked like a catalog of memories. Artifacts, trophies, or perhaps warnings. And then there were the scratches. Subtle at first, just scrapes on the wall. But as they got deeper, they became more violent. Gouges, chunks of stone missing, letters carved into cement. Let me out. I'm still here. Don't trust him. It wasn't just one hand. It wasn't just one message. This place had history. A lot of it. But here's where it gets worse. The original tunnel, based on later FBI surveys, was over 180 feet long. That's longer than half a football field. And it didn't just run under Reiner's property. It extended past it, into neighboring lots. Which means this wasn't just a personal secret. This was a network. And no one, not a single neighbor, claimed to know anything about it. But one aerial survey from the early 2000s showed faint soil disturbances across 3 backyards. Coincidence? Or the blueprint of something far bigger? Let's pause. You might be thinking, okay, but maybe it was an old Prohibition tunnel. Maybe it's been there since the 1920s. That would be a fair theory, except for one small problem. The materials used to reinforce the tunnel, especially the electrical wiring and concrete mix, date back to 1995 and 2006, which means this tunnel was updated, expanded, maintained, over decades, long after Prohibition, long after anyone had an excuse to build something like this. So if not for booze, then what? One agent made a quiet remark during the investigation that chilled even his partner. He said, "You don't build a tunnel this clean unless you're trying to move something very specific, or someone. Let that linger." This wasn't some crumbling escape route. This was functional, ventilated, supported, cleaned. There were no rats. No signs of decay, other than what they found in the chamber. This place was used. Recently, and possibly often. Back in the chamber, another shocking discovery was made. Behind the wall of photographs, one of the agents noticed a gap. A cavity. Inside was a journal. Not the same one found behind the false panel. This was different. Smaller. Rougher. The handwriting inside looked juvenile. Slanted. Scrawled in pencil. One page stood out. It read, "He said if I tell, no one will believe me." He said no one wants to believe in monsters. But I hear them. I hear them behind the walls. They hum. They wait. I think I'm next. No signature. No date. But based on the style and the pages that followed, it appeared to be the diary of a teenager. Possibly someone who lived, or was kept, down there. There were references to the upstairs. Mentions of the man with the voice. Descriptions of being told to be still, say nothing, and smile if they ever came downstairs. How many people had walked into that tunnel and never walked out? It gets stranger. Agents pulled soil samples from the tunnel walls. What they found shocked even the most hardened investigators. The dirt contained traces of chloroform, not just in small doses, saturated. Why would that be present? Unless unless someone was prepping bodies or sedating individuals before moving them into the tunnel. Now combine that with the scratch marks, the whispers in the journals, the layout of the chamber, and you get a picture so disturbing it could only exist in nightmares or in the basement of a Hollywood legend. And here's the contradiction that makes this story almost unbearable. Upstairs, the house was warm, luxurious, lined with awards, framed photos of smiling faces, Emmys, Golden Globes, a lifetime of success. Downstairs, it was a tomb, a museum of suffering, and no amount of designer furniture or social activism could mask what was hidden underneath. Because you can't bury truth. Not forever. It always finds a crack, and when it does, it erupts. But this tunnel? This wasn't the only one. And what the agents discovered next, just a few feet deeper into the unfinished corridor, would blow the lid off everything. Because behind a pile of loose bricks and dirt was something far worse than just another empty chamber. It was evidence of a pathway, a direction, coordinates scrawled into the wall in red ink. A set of numbers that pointed not back to the house, but forward, to somewhere else, to someone else. The tunnel, it turns out, was just the beginning. What does a scream look like when it's silenced forever? Not heard, not recorded, not echoed, but trapped, frozen, in the eyes of someone who died without ever being saved? Because that's exactly what the FBI saw when they stepped into the center of that chamber and peeled back the final layer of the horror. 3 bodies, lifeless, arranged with unsettling care. And what made it worse, what made even the most seasoned agents falter, wasn't just that they were dead. It was that they weren't supposed to be found. They were positioned deliberately, not thrown, not dumped, posed, each body wrapped in a thin linen cloth, once white, now faded to a yellowish beige like the pages of an old book. The cloth wasn't tied, taped, or bound. It lay gently, as if laid with reverence, like someone had dressed them in death. The air in the chamber was oppressively still. No wind, no sound. Even the buzzing of the fan in the corner had stopped, its wires cut, almost surgically, by time or by design. There was something sacred about the silence, or something sinister. The first body, female, early 20s, laid flat on her back, hands folded across her chest like a Victorian funeral painting. Eyes closed, lips parted just slightly, as if frozen mid-whisper. She wore a necklace, cheap, rusted. A small pendant with the letter M. That detail will matter later. The second body, male, older, kneeling. Yes, kneeling. Hands to his sides, head bowed forward. His posture suggested devotion, or punishment. But his face, the right side was partially decomposed. Skin collapsed around the cheekbone. Teeth visible in a ghastly half-grin that looked like it had been stretched that way, deliberately. And then came the third, the one that changed everything. She sat against the far wall. Head tilted to the side, eyes wide open, mouth agape, no signs of decay, no signs of struggle, no clear trauma. But her expression, it said everything. Terror, frozen, locked into her final moment with such vivid detail that one of the agents had to look away. She hadn't died peacefully. She'd seen something that made her wish for death. And here's where it gets even more bizarre. There were no bloodstains, no bruises, no broken bones. Initial forensic scans came back with a single, shocking word. Preserved. Preserved. That's not a word you expect to hear in a crime scene unless you're in a morgue. But this was different. There were no refrigeration units, no embalming fluids, no formaldehyde odor. Yet the bodies hadn't decomposed like they should have, especially after an estimated 10 to 15 years underground. The ambient temperature in the chamber remained unnaturally cool. And according to later analysis, there were trace amounts of something else. A chemical compound not registered in any FDA or embalming database. Almost synthetic, almost experimental. The kind of substance that doesn't come from a medical supplier, but a private lab. And guess what? Reiner was an investor in 2 such labs in the early 2000s. Coincidence? Or the first thread unraveling something much darker? Let's talk about identification. The bodies were transported under high-security protocol to a federal forensic lab. Each was fingerprinted, scanned, DNA sampled. But 2 of them had their fingertips burned, only visible under UV light, suggesting intentional tampering. Still, DNA spoke, and what it said shook everyone. The first body, the young woman, was identified as Marissa Dunning, reported missing in 2004. Aspiring actress, former model, last seen leaving a casting call on Wilshire Boulevard. Case went cold. No leads. No suspects. Parents died never knowing what happened. But now she was here, under Reiner's mansion, wearing the same necklace her sister remembered seeing her wear the week she vanished. The second body, the kneeling man, was harder to trace. No ID, no dental records, but a partial match came back from an old FBI database. He'd once been arrested under the name Jonas Fielding. No convictions, but multiple links to a defunct acting workshop in Pasadena. The same one Marissa Dunning once attended. There's that thread again. Pull it gently. It might just lead to the truth. And the third woman? She's still unknown. To this day, her identity hasn't been made public. But inside her jacket pocket, hidden beneath the linen wrap, was a small photograph. Worn, water-damaged, but visible. A young girl, age 6 or 7, blonde, braids, smiling next to a man with sunglasses. And beneath it, scribbled in shaky handwriting, "Don't forget who you are." Was she the girl? Was she the mother? Was she supposed to forget? We don't know. And that's what makes her the most terrifying of all. Because she could be anyone. Now pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what kind of person creates a space like this? What kind of mind doesn't just kill, but arranges, preserves, memorializes the dead? Some called it a shrine. Some called it a prison. But one FBI profiler called it something else. A museum of control. Not just over the victims, but over the narrative. Who lived? Who vanished? Who was remembered? And who stayed buried? Let's go back to Marissa for a second. The woman with the M necklace. Turns out, there's a surviving cousin who now lives in Oregon. She came forward after seeing leaked photos online. And what she said opened an entirely new door in the case. Marissa had once confided in her, told her she was scared of someone at the studio. Someone who had access to everything. Who told her she was special, but that no one would believe her if she said anything. At the time, the cousin thought it was just another Hollywood creep. But now she believes that someone might have been connected to Reiner's network. Or perhaps even Reiner himself. Still think this is just a conspiracy theory? Because here's where it goes even deeper. A forensic scan of the chamber revealed something previously overlooked. Blood patterns. Not pooled, not spilled, but painted. Yes, painted. Symbols drawn in what appears to be human blood, dried, flaking, almost invisible to the naked eye. One symbol appeared 5 times. A circle within a triangle, with a jagged line cutting through the center. Experts couldn't identify it. But one occult historian pointed out its resemblance to a symbol used in 19th century French theater cults. Groups who believed in transference of energy through fear. Sound ridiculous? Try telling that to the FBI profiler who confirmed the layout of the room mirrored that of ritualized psychological conditioning techniques. This wasn't just a place of death. It was a place of programming. And the victims? They weren't just killed. They were broken first, then displayed, frozen in time. But why? Why go through all this effort? Why preserve bodies instead of destroying them? Why create such a meticulously constructed chamber only to seal it away? Here's one theory. Whoever did this wasn't afraid of being caught, because they believed no one ever would. They thought they were above it, untouchable, respected, loved. And when society loves you enough, when you build a brand around righteousness, compassion, progress, you can hide almost anything behind it. Even a crypt, even a graveyard, even a lie so enormous, the truth would feel like fiction. But here's the kicker. The chamber wasn't the only one. Remember the unfinished tunnel from Chapter 2? The one that led further, deeper, toward coordinates scrawled on the wall? That route was sealed, caved in, intentionally, based on soil analysis. But before it collapsed, it led to another subchamber. Empty, unfinished, except for one chilling detail. A metal gurney, bolted to the floor, and a 4th linen cloth, folded neatly on top, as if ready, waiting, prepared for the next exhibit. The message was clear. This wasn't over. It was paused, interrupted. And had the raid not happened when it did, there might have been another body, another soul, silenced, another life, frozen in time. So the question becomes, how many more? How many other basements? How many other tunnels? How many other legends, like Rob Reiner, built their careers above unmarked graves. And when the lights go out and the cameras stop rolling, who's left behind? Still waiting, still screaming, still hoping to be found. Because what the FBI uncovered was just the beginning, and the real nightmare was about to reveal its name. What happens when a corpse turns up in a place it should never be? Not just physically misplaced, but chronologically impossible. A person declared dead, who now reappears beneath the floor of someone else's story. Because that's what happened next. And it wasn't just strange. It wasn't just disturbing. It was impossible. Because one of the bodies found beneath Rob Reiner's mansion had already been buried. Officially, publicly, in a casket, with a funeral. There was even a eulogy. So then why? Why was their body staring back at investigators from the depths of that tunnel? And more importantly, who else knew? Let's rewind just a little. After the discovery of the 3 bodies, the FBI fast-tracked DNA analysis. It was urgent, political. This wasn't just a local case anymore. It was national, maybe international. The forensic team worked around the clock. They didn't expect to get a hit from the second body, Jonas Fielding, because of the damaged fingerprints and lack of direct records. But the third body? That's where everything shattered. Her DNA came back with a match, a 99.997% certainty. Her name? Eva Goldwyn, age 24, reported missing in 1998, declared legally deceased in 2002, and buried in a marked grave in Arlington, Virginia, complete with a death certificate. Medical examiners report. The works. So how was her body found under Rob Reiner's mansion, more than 20 years later? At first, the FBI assumed there was a clerical error. Maybe it was a cousin, maybe a twin, maybe a false match. But everything aligned. Dental records, bone structure, even a birthmark on her left rib, documented in her original autopsy, and now present in the corpse beneath the house. Let that sink in. Eva Goldwyn was buried. The casket was sealed. Her family mourned. So the woman in that grave in Virginia? Who was she? And the woman in the tunnel? How did she get there? Because that was the beginning of a cover-up so deep it stretched across 2 decades and touched the fingertips of multiple industries. Here's what we know about Eva. She was an actress, not A-list, not famous, but rising. In 1997, she landed a role in an independent film that received quiet critical acclaim. She was poised for a breakout. She was beautiful, charismatic, smart. And then, she vanished. According to police reports, she left an acting class one Thursday night and was never seen again. No phone activity, no credit card usage, nothing. Her car was found 2 days later, abandoned near Topanga Canyon. No signs of a struggle, just one item left behind in the front seat. A script. The title page was torn off. The rest was heavily marked in red ink. Notes, revisions, lines scratched out, and one phrase circled in thick Sharpie. Don't forget who you're playing. Creepy? Yes, but not unusual in Hollywood. Actors talk like that. They immerse. They vanish into roles. But Eva? She didn't come back. When the case went cold in 2001, her family pushed for closure. The pressure led to a reclassification, presumed dead. A body was never recovered. But weeks later, a decomposed female body turned up in the Angeles National Forest, badly damaged by wildlife. Almost unrecognizable. But Eva's purse was found nearby, and a ring, a small sapphire ring her mother had given her at graduation. It was enough. The coroner declared it Eva. Burial followed. The case was closed. Or so they thought. Now fast forward to 2025, and imagine the expression on the FBI analyst's face when she saw that DNA match hit. Same name, same markers, same woman, still whole, still preserved, lying in the dark beneath one of Hollywood's most beloved voices. Eva Goldwyn had never been in that forest. She had never been buried. She'd been hidden, staged, and replaced with someone else. So the next question writes itself. Who was buried in her place? The FBI had to move fast. They ordered the exhumation of the grave in Virginia. The family protested, understandably. They had closure. They'd made peace. But science doesn't care about peace. It only cares about truth. And when the casket was opened, what they found inside wasn't Eva. It was another woman. Unknown. Facial reconstruction failed. No matches. No name. Just silence. Another ghost. So now the Bureau had 2 crimes. One corpse hidden for decades, and another intentionally swapped. This wasn't just murder. It was orchestration, a full-body narrative built to deceive. And it worked for 23 years. Let's return to Eva's timeline. Just days before she vanished, she had reportedly met with a director about a private project. That director's name? Redacted, but linked through shell companies to a production house called Golden Hollow Films, now mostly defunct. But in the 90s, Golden Hollow was known for edgy, psychological thrillers. And one of their backers? You guessed it, Rob Reiner. Not officially, not directly, but through a nonprofit he chaired, which funneled creative funding into indie projects. And Eva's project? Never released. No footage, no scripts, no record. But emails uncovered during the FBI's raid hinted at something else. A codename, Project Marion. And in one note, allegedly sent to a Reiner-affiliated producer, the subject line read, "Marion is ready. She remembers nothing. Should hold through 2000. What does that mean? Was Eva Marion? Was she reprogrammed? Used? Trained? Or was she simply another performer? Chosen for her vulnerability, her isolation, her willingness to please? One of the most haunting theories floated by investigators is that Eva didn't die in 1998. She lived in the tunnel for years, until something went wrong, until she was no longer useful. And when that happened, she was posed, displayed, a monument to silence. But silence has a way of cracking, and it cracked with Eva. Because her fingerprints, her DNA, her story, it broke through. And when that happened, the web began to unravel. Journalists, once too scared to dig, started sniffing around again. Old friends of Eva's started speaking up. One even claimed she saw Eva in 2005 in a Whole Foods parking lot. She waved. Eva stared back, then turned around and walked away. No words, no acknowledgement. Like a ghost, unsure if she was real. Was it a hallucination? Or had Eva resurfaced briefly? No one knows. But now, after what the FBI found, every theory is back on the table. And the people who kept those secrets? They're getting nervous. Very nervous. But Eva wasn't the only clue down there. Remember that photograph in her pocket? The little girl with braids? Turns out, that wasn't Eva. It was someone else. And guess what? That child is still alive. Now in her 30s. Living under a different name. The FBI is protecting her identity for obvious reasons. But what she told them would shock everyone. Because she remembered Eva. She remembered the tunnel. And she remembered something else. He told me if I ever talked, they'd come for me in my dreams. She used to draw him. Tall. With long fingers. Smiling too wide. Her parents thought it was an imaginary friend. But now they're not so sure. Because one of her drawings, dated 2001, shows the exact symbol found in the tunnel. The circle in the triangle. With the line cutting through. How could she know that? Unless she'd been there. Unless she was one of the lucky ones who got out. But her memories are just the beginning. Because what she revealed next would point the FBI to another estate, owned by someone even more famous, even more protected, and even more dangerous. But that's a story for the next chapter. Because the truth about Eva Goldwyn was just the start. And the tunnel under Rob Reiner's mansion was only the first portal to hell. If walls could talk, some would whisper. Others would scream. And the ones inside Rob Reiner's Beverly Hills mansion, they'd weep. Because long before the director bought that sprawling Spanish-style estate in 1994, before the hidden tunnel was carved out, before the lifeless bodies were arranged like tragic sculptures in a forgotten chamber, someone else had already started writing its horrifying legacy. And the truth? It didn't begin with Rob Reiner. It began decades earlier. With a man Hollywood quietly erased, in a house that's always attracted the wrong kind of power. Because as investigators soon discovered, Rob Reiner wasn't the first to hide secrets beneath that roof. He was just the last to get caught. Real estate records don't lie. Not when you know where to look. The FBI pulled every title deed on Reiner's property dating back to its construction in 1926. And one name kept appearing. In scattered purchase trails, shell companies, and ownership transfers during the late 1960s through the early 1980s. Victor Holland. Never heard of him? You're not alone. Most people haven't. Because Victor Holland disappeared in 1983. Vanished without a trace. But before that, he was one of the most connected producers in Los Angeles. Low profile. Never in the spotlight. Never took credit publicly. But insiders knew. Holland got things done. Need a script funded quietly? He'd handle it. Need an actor's scandal buried? He had contacts. Need an off-the-books location for your underground film? He had a house. This house. From 1968 to 1983, Holland owned the mansion that Rob Reiner would later call his creative sanctuary. But Holland never lived in it. He used it for business. According to testimonies from former studio assistants and stuntmen, the house was a neutral zone. A meeting ground for producers, directors, and actors who wanted to avoid the prying eyes of press and politics. One assistant, under condition of anonymity, described the estate as a velvet coffin. Beautiful on the outside, deadly inside. She recalled once being called to the property for a late-night read-through with an actor she didn't recognize. When she arrived, she found the script pages scattered across the floor. No crew, no lights, just candles. And the door to the basement? Locked from the inside. She left. She never went back. Weeks later, she was laid off. No explanation. No severance. No references. So who exactly was Victor Holland? The man behind the curtain? Here's what we know. Born in 1931. Started in sound design for television in the 1950s. Moved into producing experimental film in the late 60s. Linked to several now-banned films considered too disturbing for theatrical release. Known to work with method actors who often disappeared from the public eye after filming. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. In 1973, LAPD opened an unofficial investigation into Holland after a young actress, Lisa Tremaine, was reported missing by her roommate. Lisa was last seen entering Holland's mansion for a private audition. She never came out. No arrest. No charges. The case went cold. And the official note in the file? Unable to locate suspect or determine location of alleged incident. Sound familiar? Because in 2025, Lisa Tremaine's photo was found on the wall of Rob Reiner's underground chamber, framed next to the number 4. When confronted with the Holland connection, Reiner's legal team denied any knowledge of the man. They claimed he had no involvement with the property's design or structure after Reiner's purchase. But investigators quickly discovered something that blew a hole in that defense. Blueprints. Original blueprints from 1926 showed a shallow foundation, standard basement. But blueprints filed during Holland's ownership, quietly, never officially permitted, showed the beginning of something else. An expansion. A dig. Marked only as Project L. What does that mean? Some say L was for Lisa. Others believe it stood for Labyrinth. Because that's what the tunnels were called in internal memos found on a dusty hard drive seized from Reiner's home office. Access to lower labyrinth restricted after 1981. Passcode changed. H remains custodian. H, Holland? Almost certainly. Which means this tunnel system wasn't Reiner's idea. It was an inheritance. A legacy. And he accepted it. So what happened to Victor Holland? Why did he vanish in 1983? Theories vary. Some say he fled the country after pressure from a studio insider turned whistleblower. Others claim he died, murdered by someone inside the very network he helped build. But the most common belief? He simply disappeared, reabsorbed by the shadows he lived in. No remains, no sightings, no passport trails. He became the first ghost of that mansion, and his unfinished work waited for the next man willing to finish it. Here's where things get even darker. In a box labeled Old Contracts, the FBI found a photograph of a young Rob Reiner shaking hands with Victor Holland, dated 1980, 3 years before Holland vanished. Reiner was just beginning to break out from his all in the family fame. Holland was already a myth in certain circles. But that handshake, that photo, it told a story no one wanted to acknowledge. A connection. Reiner knew Holland. Maybe briefly, maybe deeply, but they weren't strangers. And that fact alone rewrites everything we thought we knew. Because if Reiner knew Holland, then he knew the house. He knew its past. And if he knew its past, why didn't he demolish it? Why didn't he seal it off? Why did he continue the tunnel? One retired detective who once brushed against the Holland investigation in 1979 summed it up best. You don't keep something that evil on your property by accident. You either destroy it, or you use it. And Rob Reiner? He used it. The evidence was everywhere. Falsified construction permits, hidden ventilation units, one-way mirrors embedded in walls that hadn't been part of the original structure. Reiner's so-called soundproof studio in the basement, built directly above the main chamber. Coincidence? Or strategic masking? Because what better way to muffle screams than with an acoustically sealed recording booth? Neighbors, too, began to come forward after the FBI raid. One said she often heard chanting from the house during the early 2000s. Another swore she saw people entering through the side gate late at night, wearing masks. And one elderly gardener recalled being fired after he reported finding scraps of cloth and hair near a drainage pipe on the property's north end. Reiner, of course, never addressed these stories. He never had to, until now, because the timeline doesn't lie. And the patterns? They're undeniable. But perhaps the most damning discovery came in the form of a letter, found tucked behind a loose stone in the tunnel wall, sealed in a plastic sleeve. Handwritten. Faded. From Victor Holland, addressed simply, "To he who inherits." The letter was short, but unforgettable. "This place demands sacrifice. It is not a home. It is a gate. Keep the gate. Feed it when the silence grows too loud. Only then will it sleep." That's not fiction. That's real. A man who vanished in 1983 left a message for the next occupant. And that occupant was Rob Reiner, who lived above that gate for over 30 years. While beneath him, the silence waited, hungered, and eventually was fed. So now we're left with a sickening revelation. This wasn't a sudden descent into madness. This wasn't one man's perversion. This was generational. A structure built to hide, to trap, to punish. And Reiner? He didn't build it, but he chose to stay. And the moment he accepted that key, the moment he walked those tunnels, he stopped being innocent and started being part of the machine. A machine that chews up the forgotten and spits out gold statues and standing ovations and slow claps from people who will never know what lies beneath the velvet. But we know now. We've seen the blueprints. We've read the letter. We've followed the tunnel. And we're not done. Because while Reiner's mansion might have been the first active site, it wasn't the only one. Because the coordinates carved into that unfinished tunnel pointed to another home, another estate, another celebrity. And what the FBI found there was even worse. Have you ever felt like you were being watched? That eerie, invisible weight pressing against your skin, even when you're completely alone. Now imagine that feeling in a pitch-black corridor, dozens of feet beneath the ground, surrounded by silence thick enough to muffle your heartbeat, and knowing it's not just paranoia, because someone is watching. Not metaphorically, literally. And that's exactly what the FBI realized as they pushed deeper into Rob Reiner's hidden tunnel network. This wasn't just a place of death. It wasn't just where secrets were buried. It was a theater, an underground cinema of suffering. And what was being watched down there wasn't meant to be acted. At first glance, the side chamber looked empty. A dead end, rough-hewn stone, scratches on the floor, old dust disturbed recently. But when an agent leaned against one section of the wall, something clicked. A soft mechanical shift. The panel opened, and behind it, a room no larger than a walk-in closet. Airtight, smelled faintly of mold and copper. Inside, a rusted steel chair, bolted to the ground. Beside it, a camera, tripod-mounted, manual focus. And behind that, a thick one-way glass window, facing into the chamber where the 3 preserved bodies had been found. That's right. Someone had been watching from behind the wall, observing, recording, maybe even directing. But for what purpose? That's what the FBI was determined to find out. The setup wasn't amateur. This wasn't some sick little voyeur's peep box. This was industrial, wired for power, ventilated, insulated with foam padding for soundproofing. Whoever used it didn't want to be heard, but definitely wanted to see. And on the shelf, 6 mini-DV tapes, unlabeled, untouched by time. When they were recovered and processed, what they revealed shook the entire case wide open. Because they weren't just videos of torture or captivity. They were sessions, structured, routine. Like episodes in a sick, ongoing experiment. Each tape opened the same way. A title card, black background, white letters, Protocol 7B, observation, followed by a timestamp. Then, the footage. One tape showed a young woman, possibly Marissa Dunning, sitting in a chair in the chamber. Eyes wide, blank expression, no restraints. She sat perfectly still, staring at the far wall. In the background, barely audible, a rhythmic humming sound. Looped. Mechanical. Every few minutes, a bright light flashed into her face, then faded. No dialogue. No interaction. Just repetition. A routine. For hours. Then, at the end, a man's voice, low, almost gentle. "We're going to try again tomorrow. You're doing beautifully." Click. End of tape. Another video was even worse. It showed a male subject, likely Jonas Fielding, being made to watch something on a screen. The footage on the screen was blurred in the recording, but Fielding's reactions told the story. Tears, tremors, hyperventilation. At one point, he tries to stand. A loud tone plays. He sits again, trapped in some kind of conditioned obedience. Pavlovian. Controlled. And again, the voice. "You still remember. But that's okay. We'll erase more tomorrow." What were they watching? What were they doing to these people? Here's where the FBI brought in outside help. A former CIA interrogation consultant, now working privately, was shown segments of the footage. His analysis? This isn't just surveillance. This is programming. You're looking at phases of psychological breakdown, memory erasure, re-imprinting. Think MKUltra, but private sector. Let that sink in. We're no longer talking about murders, or even cult-like rituals. We're talking about behavioral engineering. The victims weren't just killed. They were rewritten, used, then disposed of. And who had the power, privacy, and wealth to carry out something this elaborate? Not a lone madman. Not a deranged fan. A network. A coordinated group of people who knew how to manipulate the mind and had no moral boundary preventing them from doing it. But it gets darker. In the observation room, agents found a spiral notebook tucked under the seat. Inside, notes. Jotted, frantic, but precise. Session logs. Each entry referenced a subject number. Emotional response. Memory resistance. Breakthrough points. But one line kept appearing. Camera 3 angle too wide. Move for better detail of eye dilation. Eye dilation. They weren't just filming what happened. They were measuring physiological responses. Testing them. Which means this wasn't just depravity, it was data collection. For who? And for what purpose? At this point, the FBI had to ask, who was running the camera? Was it Reiner? Was it someone else? There were fingerprints, smudged, partial, but traceable. One matched an old employee, Samuel Brandt, a former assistant director who had worked with Reiner in the early 2000s on a shelved documentary project. Brandt disappeared in 2008, presumed dead. No one asked too many questions. Until now. Because his prints weren't just on the camera. They were also found on the inside of the glass panel. Which meant Brandt wasn't just filming. He was watching. Maybe even controlling. But why him? And where was he now? More questions. More silence. Until one tech analyst stumbled upon something strange inside a disconnected external hard drive, hidden in a folder called Reels. Password protected, but cracked within hours. Inside, dozens of thumbnails. Short clips. Encrypted, but recognizable. Different rooms. Different tunnels. Different houses. Not just Reiner's. Others. One file had a tag. Chateau_Ridge_C2. Another. Fremont_Knoll_R1. Coordinates traced back to properties in Hidden Hills. Pacific Palisades. 1. Owned by a major Hollywood director. Still active. Still producing. Still smiling in interviews. What does that mean? It means this wasn't an isolated chamber. This was a networked system. A ring. A watching machine designed to observe, test, and manipulate vulnerable individuals for reasons still unknown. The implication? There are more tunnels, more rooms, more victims, and more people who've watched. Silently. From behind glass. Detached. Scientific. Like they were observing animals. But these weren't animals. They were human. Each with a life, a story, a family that never stopped searching. And what did the watchers do? They filmed. They cataloged. They called it protocol. But we call it what it really was. Dehumanization. One final note from the session log still haunts the lead investigator. It was scribbled hastily. No date. No subject number. Just a warning. Do not let her see the mirror again. She remembers too fast. Who was her? Eva Goldwyn? Marissa? Lisa Tremaine? Or someone still alive? Still trapped? Still remembering? Because memory is a powerful thing. It can be erased, blurred, broken, but it can also return. And when it does, It can burn the whole machine to the ground. There's one more thing. In the far corner of the observation room, someone had carved a message into the cement wall. It took hours to decode. But when they did, it read, "We weren't the first." What does that mean? Other subjects? Other generations? Other tunnels and other cities? We don't know. Not yet. But one thing is certain. This tunnel wasn't designed for escape. It was built for watching, monitoring, controlling. And whoever stood behind the glass didn't just watch people suffer. They studied them. They learned from them. And they may still be out there, perfecting what they started.